But aren't you?
I started, only for him to smile at me before putting his hand over my mouth. I could feel some of the others staring at us, but didn't mind it too much. Mostly because his arm was wrapped around my waist, making me feel the feeling of love I have for him. The feeling of wanting to be close to him, to become one with him.
I'm okay eating,
He said with a more serious tone in his voice. I could tell he was surprised by it as well, seeing that his eyes widened as the words left his mouth. I wanted to blush at that statement and get embarrassed so he would come closer. So he would come closer to me and hold me. But we are in the dining room, so that's not going to happen.
Alrighty then.
I exclaimed before grabbing my fork and getting some of the rice and chicken. Shuichi laughed a bit at this before I put some on his plate as well.
Let's eat up then, shall we?
I said, giving Shuichi a side glance. He looked over at me confused before he looked at his plate with the same nervous look. He must still be nervous about what happened with the first time he bit me, as well as the last time he bit me, which was fairly recent. I held his hand in my own to get his attention off his plate.
Kokichi?
He asked, making eye contact with me for a moment before he looked down at my neck before his eyes went to the floor. I frowned a bit and grabbed his chin to make him look at me.
I can tell you're nervous, Shu. You can't lie to a liar.
I said with a smirk.
Well, I wasn't trying to hide it or anything. I just hate having to eat anything because I feel so filthy all the time.
He whispered the last part, but I was able to catch it even with all the chatter in the room.
You don't have to feel nervous about that because...
I paused, smiling gently before placing a kiss on his cheek. He blushed at this and stayed silent.
I will be here to help you become more comfortable in any way you need.
I kept my smile as I grabbed his hand from where it had moved to, before holding it in my own. His eyes moved to where our hands were, and I felt a small blush come to my cheeks from his stare. I moved our hands to my chest and gently caressed the back of his hand.
You don't have to do that,
he said before I cut him off by pulling him closer to me.
Eh? You don't think I would do that for my beloved?
I asked, blinking my eyes a couple of times with fake tears coming to them. This made his face seem more worried.
I didn't mean that,
he said, trying to calm me down, worried I was going to have a breakdown. I giggled a bit, making him more confused.
I was just joking with you, Shumai.
I teased, poking his nose as my tears went away. He seemed to still be confused, but relaxed a bit at my words.
Yeah, I knew that,
he said, looking to the side. I smiled again and held some food to his lips when he turned back around.
Eat up,
I said before he gently opened his mouth. I put the fork into his mouth before pulling it back slowly to get more food to repeat the process. He blushed at the action and tried to talk to me through his full mouth.
Cookie, you can't.
He said, muffled by the food. I smirked before I tilted my head to look at him.
I can't hear you, Shushu,
I said before putting another forkful in his mouth. He blushed more at this and said another muffled phrase before he went quiet.
You shouldn't talk with your mouth full,
I added, making him roll his eyes at me. I leaned back with a fake hurtful expression.
Shumai,
I gasped, making him give me a look that told me he knew I was faking it.
How could you?
I asked, making him try to say something again before I put the fork to his lips to stop him.
I'm just messing with you. You make it super duper easy, Shuichi.
I said, holding out the syllables of his name to rhyme with the other words. Shuichi just took the forkful of food in his mouth before he looked down at his empty plate. He looked at me with a neutral expression, making me feel a little worried if I took this too far with the teasing.
Now it's your turn,
he said after he swallowed the rest of his food. I felt the blush come to my face.
Eh?
I asked before he grabbed his own fork and got a forkful of food for me. I felt so embarrassed, but contained myself. I'm not going to let him get the upper hand.
Aw, Shui, you're so sweet,
I said before I leaned toward him and opened my mouth in anticipation. He paused for a moment before I felt the fork go into my mouth. I smiled at the delicious food I tasted.
Yummy.
I said before getting cut off by another forkful. I looked Shuichi in the eyes, and he was determined. I blushed a bit at this before I went back to teasing him. I ate all the food off my plate and kissed Shuichi after we went to take our plates to the sink. Shuichi blushed before he whispered something in my ear.
Why do you make this so hard for me?
He pulled back and put his dishes on the counter next to the sink before he turned back to me. I smiled at him and took his hand in mine after putting my dishes on the counter.
Because I love ya.
I said with a smirk before we both made our way back up to our room. I smiled at the fact that I share a room with Shuichi and that I get to be this close to my quiet yet amazing detective boyfriend. The chatter from downstairs faded away as we walked up to our room. Shuichi didn't say anything as he turned the doorknob to the room. We walked into the room and he turned to me as he shut the door.
Shu?
I asked, trying to look him in the eyes, but his hair was covering his eyes.
Kokichi.
He whispered, making me move closer to him to hold his hands. Did I really offend him because of how far I went with the teasing?
Thank you.
He said, finally meeting my eyes. He had a blush covering his cheeks as his eyes looked right into my own. I smiled at him, although I was feeling confused as to why he was thanking me.
Why thank you?
I asked gently, taking his hands in my own. He intertwined our fingers together as his eyes moved to the side. I was feeling a little worried about the change in his mood and because of how quiet he was being, even though it is just the two of us.
Because you are helping me with a lot of things. Being so accepting about the biting as well as the bond, and helping me eat even though I don't feel like it all the time.
He said before moving me closer to his chest. I nuzzled my face against his chest before he continued.
So, thank you for everything.
He moved his hands to my upper back to hold me. I felt my body relax under his touch. I love it when he holds me like this. I feel so safe and so warm.
Of course, anything for my beloved.
I said in my usual tone, except this time it was a little more on the serious side. I wanted to show him that I was being serious and that I wanted to do this for him. Not just him using me for his own benefit. He's shown me that those aren't his true intentions. So I trust him as my boyfriend and as my lover.
Thanks.
He whispered again before I yawned. God, I feel so tired all of a sudden. It must be because of the warm feeling in my chest, face, and hands from being in his hold.
Tired?
He said, pulling back a bit. I would have usually said no with a joking tone, but I honestly felt really tired. I knew there was no point in lying about it to Shuichi.
Yeah.
I said, leaning against him. He chuckled a bit before he picked me up and placed me on the bed. He moved to grab some pajamas for the both of us, and I smiled as his eyes began to feel heavy.
Here, I'll help you get changed.
He said before he helped me stand up, helping me change. I just tried my best to help him be able to help me get changed, because falling asleep or leaning completely on him would make it harder. After a few moments, he set me back on the bed before he quickly changed. I reached out for him because I was tired and feeling really clingy. I just wanted him by my side so I could sleep.
I'm right here, Cookie.
He said quietly before moving the covers to let me into them as well as taking his place right beside me. I smiled and moved into his arms where he sighed content with being here with me.
Good night, my Kichi.
He said, placing a kiss on my forehead, and after that, I was out.